Happy Friday. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice day today. We are moving right into the weekend, and that will be, for some of you, a time of rest and recreation. I wish it was that way for everyone, but we'll get there sometime. First up tonight is a gentleman we're going to refer to as Mr. Nano. Now, I'm really looking forward to this because it has been, as you know, if you've been listening, many years since I had someone on the program who was well acquainted with nanotechnology and who was willing and able, key word there, able, to talk about it freely. The guy I had was terrific, but somebody told him to shut up, and he literally vanished. Not from the planet, but from this program. I couldn't get any response out of him at all. So we're going to try again tonight with a new gentleman who has 20 years in the field. You know what that means. That means he's got an insight to most everything of any significance, consequence, or, well, whether it's defense or civilian application, we're going to find out. Mr. Nano, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This is
certainly a pleasure.
Yeah, this is my first time calling in on any radio show. This is
well, there's no one listening,
new to me.
So don't worry. There's no one listening. You're just talking to me.
Oh, fantastic.
That's one way to look at it. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind either way. At the end of the day, I'm happy to be here talking with you. And as much as I can say, I'd like to get it out there in the open.
Right. Let me seize that statement. Let me grab that just as a starter. As much as I can say, what kind, and I don't want any disclosures of anything that will cause you any grief whatsoever, obviously, but what kind of strictures are you in? What applies to the field of nanotechnology by way of boundaries, parameters, and limits? What are the general rules of thumb? You may not even have had to be told. It may be one of those unspoken understandings of scientists and others who work in the field. What about stricture?
Yeah, good point. I would say the past 10 years have really changed my understanding of basically life in general.
Wow.
I could say it was more or less a depressing realization for myself growing up in a completely different world of the world where most people live, where you listen to the news and you're told and you grow up in a certain education system. Your reality kind of gets crushed when I realized that everything I was told growing up is not really the truth. As far as the nanotechnology, I've been working, so this would be my 20th year, and what we do, we make certain parts for high-powered microscopes, so you can see at the atomic level.
Uh-huh.
Our customers are basically anyone who's looking into the nano world, so that goes from industry, universities, to government labs, anyone pushing atoms around to make new materials, to look at different reactions. It gets now into the nanobio is really big these days. At the end of the day, looking at the transformation of nanotechnology from 20 years ago to now has been quite amazing. I remember...
Go ahead. That's probably an understatement, but go ahead.
Absolutely. So when I was more of a engineer starting out, I was only to receive information other than just kind of do your job and make products. And then as I kind of grew in my positions and climbed the ladder, so to speak, now I control one of these companies. I have much more access to information. I do sign a lot of NDAs. I can't really talk in much detail on some of the things yet. I think that would be changing in the next probably few years, really, with as disclosure I'm seeing now coming forth with the military and whatnot, just on the local news and the mainstream media. It seems like it's going to be much more open, talking about really anything.
Things are changing, and when you have, as you have seen, the Pentagon and the Navy essentially admitting that the cover-up is over, it's all been a lie, there are UFOs, they don't know who's inside flying them or what's flying them, they see them all the time, they've even instituted and announced a new protocol to report them, which will not be made available to us, but they've admitted that essentially it's over now. The deceit, right, the lie, the stonewalling, they've really made that announcement. And as I said, and others have said, the public, ho-hum, no big deal. They're not even responding much.
Right, right. That's the kicker, too. I mean, in my circle, I do all the big conferences every year, all the society conferences, American Physical, so all the physicists, and then the American Chemical Society, Material Research Society, all the big science conferences every year. I've seen change in 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. Well, after 10 years ago, I wasn't even had a clue about this field, really. This is the UFO phenomena. I was completely in the dark. I was like anybody else in the public. After about 10 years ago, I walked into, I basically I got control of a company, and I walked in at one of the conferences to some VPs who were at a billion dollar corporations, and they were talking about the tall whites in Minneapolis, and I didn't really know what that was. I played dumb, basically, and I've known these people for 10 years on top of that, and they just kind of kept their conversation going like it was just over coffee. It wasn't a big deal, but they were basically shifting resources around to find the right person to install equipment in a facility working with the tall whites in cancer research. And I was dumbfounded. I didn't know what to say. I didn't really have anything to say. I just kind of listened and kind of pretending like I knew what was going on. And then the next 2 days, I literally had a kind of a briefing on what's really happening.
Who gave you the briefing?
So that was my introduction, just like an informal briefing over some beers and talking about different stories everybody had with their just how they kind of experienced and how they became aware of the phenomenon, what's happening, and the secrecy. And then over time, the secrecy wasn't over, hush hush. It was just talking about it. I mean, you can just kind of talk almost in the middle of a public place and not care. So I didn't, for a while I was like, people are going to be tapping on my door, or my phone's tapped, or am I saying too much? And I was really worried about that. And then now it doesn't matter. I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure everything I've said in the past, everything's recorded. There is not a secret place on this planet. You could be in the middle of the ocean under the water, and you're still not. There is no privacy.
Understood.
If that's
unfortunate. Right. When I asked who briefed you, I didn't want a name. I meant what level. Was it within your community of science and research, or was it something outside the community from potentially the military-industrial complex? Who made a special effort to brief you? It sounds like you were among friends.
Yeah, it was among friends. A $1 billion research corporation that sells instruments, basically. And they also work with the DoD and all the different military levels. There's certainly a collaboration and different agendas going. And I wanted to be more of a part of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to get there. A couple of things. This is such a wonderful topic, and you're putting out extraordinary information. One quickie back to the microscope thing, and then I'm going to fast forward right back to where we are now. Can I assume, or should I assume, that the type of technology and hardware that your company and maybe others are involved with allows us now to see, if that's the right verb to see down to the atomic level, to see the nanotech that's being constructed, created, and used? Are we able to do that?
Oh, yeah. We've been doing that since the 80s, in the public eye anyway. There's numerous ways to do that. There's electron microscopes, which is you're bombarding things with electrons, and there's a hit the detector, and you kind of see what you're looking at in the monitor. There's also atomic force microscopy, where you're using like little styli, kind of like a record player, and it has a sharp needle on it. And similar to a record player, it spins around, the needle goes up and down, undulates, and it gets transformed into an electrical signal, and you hear music. So if you shrink down that little needle millions of times smaller, billions, to the very end of it, it's this little needle that's a nanometer in size, which is super tiny, a billionth of a meter, which taps along a surface. Say you're looking at proteins and atoms, any kind of material. So you're looking at semiconductor industry, for your cell phones and electronics. You're looking at bio industries. So all the biologists and these days are looking at DNAs and proteins and putting different chemicals on them to see how they react. Mm-hmm. Then you're looking at, let's see, so the nanobio is really big these days. And then there's the whole materials is huge. Materials is probably the biggest thing. So you have huge amounts of funding and scientists and resources looking at different materials. You're looking at self-sensing materials, different kinds of it went 20 years ago. The cool thing was carbon nanotubes. And I remember telling my friends and family, hey, we're making these carbon nanotubes, and a carbon nanotube basically is like a piece of spaghetti. It's flexible. It's just a single carbon atom tube, so it's hollow, it's flexible, but yet you can conduct electricity through it, a current. And it's harder and stronger than a diamond. So you have something that's flexible, conducts electricity, and it's super strong. So that was amazing. And theoretically, you could put a computer a billion times faster inside the lint of your T-shirt. So you're shrinking a computer down to the atomic level. This was 20 years ago, and now you're seeing these integrated into all sorts of different things. But really, the heart of it, I see. I mean, you can go to any PI, so principal investigator, any group website pick a university, go to UCLA or Stanford or any of them really, and look at the different websites that these groups have, and they're looking at all sorts of different nano bots. Now there's nanobots and nano anything. So you have really, at the end of the day, and now quantum. Now everything's about quantum.
Can you define quantum Can you give us a real quick workmanlike definition of from nano down to quantum? What is quantum? How do we use that term?
Yeah, I'm not the right person to give the whole scientific definition
it's
for that.
It's a very deep and convoluted concept, a word that means an awful lot of things from what I understand.
It does, and at the end of the day, I read an article yesterday where a group, where was it? I think it was MIT, basically teleported a particle. So an encoded packet of light, of energy. And at the end of the day, these two particles, two protons, you could say, they're entangled. So if you have, and it's irrespective, it doesn't matter how the distance, it could be on the other side of the galaxy or it could be next to each other. Say you turn the light on in one room, the same light turns on in the other room. So
it's instantaneous.
It's instantaneously. You could literally, and now they're working on, these quantum computers, so which would be ridiculously faster in speed, memory, and the whole nine yards. But at the end of the day, it's as far as privacy and security, these quantum computers could be like unbreakable, apparently. But I'm sure that at some point someone will figure that out. But
all right, now let me do what I promised and fast forward. I'm going to ask you to comment on just a general question.
Yeah.
On May let's just say on June 1st, which is tonight at midnight, the year 2019, can you say, without equivocation, for all of our listeners out there who are honest skeptics, that it's game over, it's time to stop the cover-up, we are not only aware of other intelligent life forms, as you alluded to earlier, some are here, the tall whites, and they are working with our scientists in the bio-nano field, at least. In other words, human beings and extraterrestrials are working side by side routinely. Is that a fair statement?
I would say 100% yes.
I hope all of you
Absolutely.
heard that out there. And this
yeah,
is...
and you could...
Is, yeah.
One person let's see, I could go about this a number of different ways, but at the end of the day, I spent the last 7-8 years researching the heck out of everything I could find about this UFO thing. I had a near-death experience about 8 years ago, and this is about the same time I took over this company. So I started hearing and seeing things that weren't made from here, or were made from here, but the technology was given to us in some form or fashion. I don't know the details on that, but something that blew my mind, and I said, "Whoa, where's this? Where did this come from?" And so that kind of got me going to get more information. I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to do everything I could to be involved. And shortly after that, I had a near-death experience. I had pancreatitis. My pancreas shut down. And I spent about 10 days in the hospital in the ER. My body shut down a few different times. And that experience blew my mind, which I'd be happy to talk about too. But ever since that experience, every single day I've been researching and trying to figure out how I can help get this out there. And everywhere I turn, I uncover a different rock. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that corroborates that. That corroborates that. That's exactly what I thought here. And you can just take a step back and look at technology and how science has evolved over the years. And it's clear as day where it's going. And we are certainly not alone.
Yes. And it's clear as day why it has accelerated so much in the last 65, 70 years. It took off.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we had help.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We have help. We have had help. We go from horse and buggy to, an SUV on Mars, driving around, taking soil samples, and to where we are now. Absolutely. And where we could be. The biggest depressing thing I came to realize is that it's been hidden from the public and hidden from people, which frustrated the hell out of me. And I think I see why in a lot of ways. I can see why it's happening. This disclosure anyway is happening, why this is kind of how it's happening. But at the end of the day, I wish it would happen 100 years ago. I mean, I've heard stories that Tesla tapped into this 0-point energy field back in like 1902. Mm-hmm. And we wouldn't have roads, we wouldn't have gas, oil, all the terrible things that we don't need that's killing our planet. And of course, it comes down to money and power and all that.
I understand exactly what you're saying. But we didn't have to take the road we're on now. We didn't have to ruin the planet. No. This was forced on us by what I call unlimited greed, avarice, and evil. We didn't have to be put through any of this.
No, you're right. Absolutely not. It could have been done a million different ways. It's unfortunate that it's the military industrialized complex. I'd say it's pharma too in there. It's huge. Yeah. And it's about information. It's about technology and keeping the technology as best as they can to capitalize and slowly drip out, of course, to the public so they can make money off it. But the entire society and civilization could be just changed in a heartbeat. And I wish that my kids see that one day. Ever since I had kids too, that changed everything for me. It was, yeah, completely depressing. And I honestly, I've told my family, I wish I never knew this information. And I wish, sometimes I didn't, but now I do, and I want to change and do something. And I know a lot of scientists out there and a lot of people who are just in the same boat. And I think it's this great awakening we're kind of all having. And we just have to talk to people. We have to show people, here's what's going on. And some of these NDAs run out. I'm going to run around with what I found. And I have evidence that, yes, there's this technology out there. And there's, people need to see it. They need to use it. They need to have it. They need to move on. We need to move on with all our lives. We shouldn't be out there amongst the stars.
Yeah. Yes. Some suggest we already are by one means or another. We're going to lose it soon if we don't. Look at Fukushima. Look at the accumulation, constant discharge into the environment of death, radioactive death. It's completely enclosing the northern hemisphere and spreading into the south. And it's getting worse every day. 76 gray whales dead this year already. Starvation. Yeah. There's nothing for them. They're starving to death. This is what we're doing to the planet, let alone human beings. We've got a whole graveyard up east of Pasco, Richland, Kennewick, and the atomic nuclear Hanford facility. There's a graveyard up there, and it apparently is almost the exclusive domain of parents who have children that are born with no brain inside their cranium. And they put all these children with no brains are buried there. Yes, this is our doing, though. We've done this.
Absolutely.
We've through our ignorance, not our fault, we have allowed this to happen. But it's not our fault. We've been conned, we've been lied to, we've been sacrificed by the hundreds of millions for reasons that are pretty damned eclectic when you look at it, allegedly.
Right.
And now we're sitting here, and you're telling me things that I've been doing this program in 3 weeks. It'll be 26 years. And I have talked to a lot of people, and what you're telling me confirms everything I have suspected all this time. And I'm very grateful to you for doing that, and I'm sure a lot of people listening feel the exact same way. I knew when I lost my Nano guy that Nano was it. And I began to notice that the word nano didn't even appear in the news, the so-called news, the propaganda mill. With Nano, it disappeared. It went totally black, and I knew it was roaring in the background. How, just for fun, the old cliche, Mr. Nano, that we're 20, 30 years ahead of where they'll tell us they are. How true is that, or is that an understatement in some fields?
That's something I've been thinking about a lot. I've heard 1,000 years. They're 1,000 years more advanced. So it's hard for me to gauge. I mean, in 20 years, I've seen quite a lot change. But what I've heard out there, I mean, I can tell you what I've heard from people in government labs and in labs that are working on materials that are basically living and breathing. You have organic materials that if you walk into the room and you're in a bad mood, that material will turn red because it knows you're in a bad mood.
Oh, my.
And that material is self-sensing. It's self-actuating. It can be 3D printed in any form you want.
Self-replicating?
Biologically. Self-replicating. So, I mean, all this stuff about, 3D printing a heart and all that stuff, this is old news. Completely old news. This is what I was told. Literally, teleporting is possible. Portals are possible. I've heard from many people that we are living this quantum holographic universe. That's something I'm trying to wrap my head around there, where time doesn't exist. Everything kind of lives on, past, present, and the future are all in the same plane. It's just different levels, kind of like a hotel is how it was explained to me, with different floors. But with like elevators or the connectors of the different levels, and are these portals and blah, 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 it gets crazy. Absolutely crazy. And when I started researching it and listening to people who've had near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, they all say basically the same thing, that there's most people say there's a light and, they're greeted or there's people there. I came across one person who really hit home for me when I was doing some research with my experience. If I can tell you about that real quick, if you like.
I had what there was an assassination attempt. I shouldn't be here, but I am, and I had an NDE. It was rather classic in some ways, and in others, it wasn't. My voice began speaking to represent me in the ICU unit, but it wasn't me making my voice speak. My voice refused brain surgery. No surgery. It was my voice, but it wasn't me.
Wow.
And then it said, I am in full control of my faculties. I do not authorize surgery under any circumstances. Do you understand me? My voice said that to the chief nurse. And they were all scrubbed, two neurosurgeons down the hall. They were on the way to get me when I snapped awake like a light switch after being in basically a death coma for 4.5 hours. My eyes popped open when they were on the way down the hall to put me on the gurney to take me in to saw the top of my head off and start cauterizing all the damage to my brain. And that's when the voice began to talk. And I checked myself out the next day and went home. Something told me to do that. And that's some kind of intervention, some kind of help. And what yours was like, I don't know, but I would like very much to hear about this because it's so relevant. We're held hostage by all of these concepts that are lies, and they've got to be put to rest somehow. So please go ahead.
Absolutely, and I have my notes here, and in big, bold, black letters, the main thing is, from my experience, the key takeaway is I was in full control, just like you said, full control. That's crazy you said that. But this is something that I've also heard other people talk about too. But basically what happened with me was I had my pancreatic attack. It was 2 a.m. I went to my wife and said, I got a stomachache. So long story short, most people who have pancreatitis are alcoholics. It's 80%. Then the 20%, it's a genetic thing. So I wasn't a big drinker too. I had some beers in college, whatnot. I later find out through my doctor, Walter Park at Stanford, that he wanted to make me a guinea pig because he believes it was genetic. I stopped doing all that stuff. But back to that night, it was 2 a.m. I had really bad stomach pain, the worst pain I ever thought. I said, I'm going to die. I need to go to the hospital. Something's really wrong. So we got in the car, drove to the hospital. I basically just crawled in, and they put me on a gurney, I guess, and that was it. That's all I remember. Next thing I know is I woke up screaming, do not take my kids, do not go with the monsters. And my wife was there, and she said, Nick, you're okay, everything's okay. Sorry, anyway. What I recall shortly after was when I settled down was the experience. And I vividly remember standing in a room with people who I knew. I couldn't put a face next to it. I know that they were there. They were right next to me, and I looked right at them. And one of them, it might have been my passed away grandma or grandpa. I'm not sure. I'm still trying. I'd like to do a regression on this if we know any good people who could do this. I'd love to do it, but
yeah, we can.
They put their hand on my shoulder and said, "What are you doing here?" Completely surprised. And I said, "Oh, yeah, no, I've messed up. I shouldn't be here." And I remember bending over, looking down at a screen, and it was almost a black and white screen. That's what I recall, whatever that means. So I was looking down at a screen, and I remember looking at my body in the hospital room and pointing and saying, "I got to get back there. I got to get back there." And they all looked at me, and I was in full control. I remember it completely yeah, I got to get back there. And they said, "Nick," I use my name, it's all right. But they said...
Well, that's the name we decided before the program. It's an alias we were going to use. And then we changed it to Mr. Nano. So I understand. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, they call me, that's fine. It doesn't matter. So I remember looking at the screen, looking at myself in the hospital bed, saying, I got to get back there. And I was in full control, and I realized that myself, wow, this is something new to me. And I looked back at the beings, and I said, is everything okay? Can I go back? And they said, you messed up. And if you mess up again, we're going to take your kids away and your wife. And I said, you're not touching my kids. But I didn't have kids then. My wife was pregnant with our first one. And they said, okay. And then I remember looking back at the monitor thinking like, shoot, I gotta do something now. And then all of a sudden I woke up. I guess I wasn't awake at this point, but in my brain, I woke up. I see my wife at the hospital room door with two kids next to her. And one was shorter, one was taller. And now I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old. And they're both girls. And I said, don't let them take our two kids. And she said, don't worry, no one's going to take our kids. And I said, do not go with them. And then she gave me a okay, and she turned around and walked out. The next thing I know, I look over my shoulder, and in white kind of doctor's robes, these two beings were talking to me. I'm pretty sure it was telepathy, so I don't remember face, but they said, don't look at us. Don't look at us. And I didn't look. And then they started walking out. I peeked, and I saw what now I learned that they were basically like mantids, two insects, huge 8-foot tall insects in lab coats, walked right out the door. The second they walked out the door, my wife came back in. I said, don't go with those monsters. And she's like, but she didn't, but she was pregnant then. She didn't have the kids. She was pregnant. Like I was back in this reality. I said, don't go with the monsters. She's like, Nick, you're not going with, there's no monsters here. I'm like, gee, they just walked out the door. Those insects. And I was screaming this. I was completely irate. The nurses, I was calling anyone I could. But everyone thought I was crazy. And for years, I thought I was crazy until I started researching what I saw, or just researching the whole NDE thing and finding similar stories here and there. And then my memory started coming back to me over time. And now I could say it's very clear. And I'd like a full regression. I want to see what else I'm missing. But I do know that there was two beings in the room. They told me not to look at them because they didn't want me to get freaked out, and they didn't want to have this impression in my brain that there are some sort of insects or something I'm not used to. That's what I've understood. That's what I was told. And I was in full control of the whole thing. And from that day on, everything I do, I think twice about and make sure I'm doing everything I can honestly and in the right manner, and I don't want to mess up again. For whatever I did, I wasn't doing, and then, there were some things I was doing, sure, maybe drinking too much or this or that, but at the end of the day, I was lying to people here and there, just little stuff though, not like, but now I'm just like, to the T, it's black or white. I tell you the truth, 100%. If you don't like it, too bad. No white lies just to quote something or to make my life easier. You're going to hear the truth, and I'm going to do everything in my power from my heart. Everything now comes from my heart. Whether you like it or not, this is what it is. And from that mentality, over the years, I've really gotten to learn more about myself and where we are in this reality. And from what I understand, talking to different physicists and scientists and spiritual people too, I've been reading a lot about, is that basically we're an antenna and we're some sort of feedback pool for the universe. And everything is information. And everything we experience is some sort of feedback to the universe. That's kind of my perception now of reality, I guess you could say.
Does that necessarily mean that 7.2 billion people are being utilized, I didn't say used, being utilized in the same fashion? Or is it a selected group among the billions that would be used for feedback?
I think any information is good. And just in general science, if you can learn anything from any human being, whatever they did or whatever they're doing, it's some sort, and it's information. And how that makes the universe a better universe, then that's what they're going to do. And I think I am now the whole soul thing. I want to research more, and it's my understanding that there's, we are containers, is what I've learned too, in a lot of ways. And some containers don't have souls, and maybe that's these.
That's what I'm alluding to.
Out there.
Well, I'm alluding to that kind of. They're walking, they're talking, but there's a component missing. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no elitism here. I'm just saying that's what it seems to be. You have said some remarkable things that make perfect sense to me, and I'm sure most of our listeners. This is the best audience in talk radio. They are the wisest, most open-minded, fair people ever. The idea that, let's see, how will I best phrase this? That we are being utilized and being observed and watched, and yet we're destroying ourselves, seems very foreign to the overall agenda that is apparently underway. That said, I'm going to go back to what you said. You had a second chance, and you took that second chance, and it changed you.
Right.
My situation is necessarily bad. I've always been the same kind of person since I was a little kid. And every day is a challenge, every day is a blessing. And I do like you, I can hear it in your voice. You do your very best at everything you do. And you probably don't sleep a whole lot, like I don't. We only have so much time, whatever time is. But the idea that we are here and we have opportunity to, first of all, I hope this doesn't sound maudlin or corny, but we have an opportunity to make this experience of life better by what we put out there, but what we choose to do to others, how we treat others. Simple things, kindness, sensitivity, care, concern. These are to me monumentally important values. And I would suggest that if they gave you a second chance and sent you back, they're more than aware of that situation and are probably very happy that you took your opportunity and changed course. I would guess that. I'm just guessing.
I agree to a sense. The one thing I can't cross yet is that I felt like I was in so much control that I was my choice to come back, and they didn't have a choice about it.
Free will dominates.
I'm like,
Individual free will.
Did they really send me back or no? I'm like, no. I remember specifically like 100 different times telling them, like I was like the king. I said, I'm going back. You're not touching my family, or else I said, or else I'll get you. Like there was animosity and negativity in my thought. That's what I can't cross in my brain yet. I can't bring that together. But for whatever reason, I was in full control. It was my choice to come back, and if they were going to step in my way, there'd be repercussions. So, but I don't know. Maybe that's what I really truly believe.
Well, I think that what you're saying is actually a very good overlay. In my case, I was not ready to go. I saw the light. I started to go into the light, and I'll tell you, I have never experienced more ecstatic happiness, peace, comfort. I said, geez, I'm going home. I felt like I was going home, and all the grief of this planet was left behind. And yet, I knew I had a lot of work to do. And from what you're telling me, it's pretty clear I may have chosen to come back. Or I was sent back right before I was going to be taken in and done away with, basically. Not with intent.
Yeah.
But you can't survive that kind of surgery.
No, that's interesting. That's what I'd like to do, like a full regression at some point. But I really believe, maybe I was I don't remember any lights or anything like that. I just remember in a second I was next to people and I was looking at a monitor. And I kind of feel like I was on some kind of ship above Earth, too. So maybe I was in between somewhere. And they just, I feel like it was almost my shit. Like it was I owned it, and those are people working for me in a way too. Because I don't have a big connection with. It was my grandma or someone I really loved. It was just like maybe a coworker up there. They're like, "Hey, what are you doing, Nick? What are you doing?" And I
Mr.
said,
Nano.
Mr. Nano, I got to get back. Nick Nano.
You can call yourself. I told Frank, you can call yourself a dozen names. I don't care. We just want to protect you, so you do whatever you want.
No problem. He told me Nick Nano because it rhymed. But
all right.
At the end of the day, go ahead.
We have. I'm not sure about our time. I've got about 6 minutes left in this hour. I certainly want you to come back if you would like, and we need to continue this conversation.
It's only going to get crazier, I can tell you that. So there's going to be a ton of stuff to talk about.
Yeah. So let's just kind of wrap this up in the next 5 minutes for this first visit, and you are as protected as I can make anyone, and always will be. And when you come back next time, and it's clear you're only disclosing and discussing that which you know and you feel confident about, that it's okay to do, and that's fine. Now, I want to spend just a few minutes on the tall whites. Have you, Mr. Nano, seen any that have been identified to you as such?
No, I've not seen. I've seen a craft. I have not seen an actual ET.
Can you tell us
about
the craft?
I've also been told that you wouldn't recognize it. You know, an ET would just look like you. I've been told that before. One of my colleagues said they told me to go check out Bob Bigelow's 60 Minutes. So I went and Googled it, and I found Robert Bigelow, the 60 Minutes interview he did, and it said, you're probably aware of it, they're right under our noses. And this is what I was told at a conference. They said, go check this out, and there you go. You want to know if you're walking by them, if you're sitting next to somebody?
No. That's right.
I said, okay, well,
completely agree with you.
I have seen some tall, very tall, odd-looking white people at very sophisticated conferences that just seemed out of place. And
one of them came to visit me when I was in high school. One of them came to visit me and spent I don't know how long in an office interviewing me or talking to me. It's another time, another story, but this was not a normal person. As I look back now, I know. It was strange. Now tell me about the craft, if you will. We've got 3 minutes. Just give me a sketch of one that you've seen. Are you flying around, lights in the sky, or what? What do we got?
Yeah, there's two. Which is one I was with mother-in-law and my wife. We're up by San Jose area, actually right by NASA Ames Research Lab, and right above NASA there was a multicolored lights, different hues of lights, just one craft, and it was zigzagging, and my stepmother saw it first when we were driving on the freeway. She's like, what's that? So we all stared at it for a good minute, and it was doing crazy maneuvers, and then just disappeared right in midair. This was around 8 years ago, too, kind of around the same time.
Huh. And they
then
switched
about
on their
5
stealth
years,
technology, maybe.
Appeared
to vanish. Or they took off.
Or they took off really quick. The second one was a pure white glow. There was no colors at all. It was just the white glow, a ball, not really glowing, just a white light. And it was right over the hills. It was actually really close, maybe a mile and a half, couple miles away from us. And I was with my neighbor, and we were on the golf course. And I pointed up there. It looked like maybe like a Cessna from a far distance, because it was going really slow. We live kind of near an airport. It was going really slow, just right over the top of the ridge line. And I didn't bring it up or anything. I was just staring at it for 10 seconds or something, and then it stopped. I said, whoa, and I pointed to my neighbor. I said, hey, that plane just stopped. And I kind of glanced at it again. I'm like, didn't have any wings. It was just a ball of white light. And then it took off. And it did a zigzag. It stopped. It went backwards, all kinds of zigzags for about 10 more seconds. And then that one disappeared for sure. It had disappeared. because it just literally vanished right in front of me. It was close enough where I didn't see it shoot up straight or anywhere. It just disappeared.
Right.
And then that was the first time he's ever seen something, and he was never a believer, didn't even care about UFOs, and now he's into UFOs. Because that was certainly something not normal.
Safe to say that in many cases, we see what we are supposed to see, or what they may want us to see. That's certainly well within their purview.
Right. Yeah, that's what I get too. I really think that just elevated consciousness will get you a step closer. Just being aware that we're not alone, we've been lied to. There's so much more out there. We're not even touching the tip of the iceberg yet.
I believe it.
Which gets me, just look at science now and physics and smashing particles smaller and smaller. We're literally at the cusp of something really special. I mean, for the public anyway, and the normal science community, which could be 1,000 years behind what's really out there.
Absolutely incredible.
Gets my brain going constantly. I can't stop thinking about this. I want to speed everything up as fast as I can. It's just crazy.
So much to learn, so much to discover.
Absolutely.
I really admire what you've done and what you've been through and what you've shared with us. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to another conversation, I hope. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I'm here anytime you need me, and I'll keep researching and learning and poking my nose where I can. And there's a lot out there still.
Well,
and I'm really on the consciousness side is what I really want to focus on too. We could maybe have another talk about that sometime. I've been doing a lot of research with like SRI and how Dr. Putoff's work and all that stuff, and I've even tried to get a contact.
I knew Ingo.
Okay.
And it goes way back to the first director. There were two guys at SRI. One of them was the first director of the operation. He used to come on the program actually a lot back then, and the whole remote viewing thing, and
Sure.
We'll talk. And I'm really happy to hear of someone who loves his family. That's special in this culture of ours. It's almost a lost art.
I don't get that. That's all I don't care about is just
Yeah.
Where's empathy? Empathy is out the door, it seems like.
I got you loud and clear. Okay. Thank you very much again. All right. You be well.
Thanks, Jeff. Take care. You too.
Bet. Okay. Well, I tell you, in coming up on 26 years, I have never had more in 1 hour that locked more things into perfect alignment than what I just heard. And I hope a lot of it worked for a lot of you. It's all up to us individually to make our decisions on what we can accept and integrate into ourselves. But that was remarkable.